Hi there, I'm Danny Schechter, your news dissector. I'm a blogger, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a troublemaker, and I'm also an author. And I'm really happy that my books are now going to be available as ebooks on Rekiosk, which is a cool new site. And I'm trying to be cool wearing these shades for this interview. But I'm going to take the sunglasses off and listen to some questions about issues that the publisher and the people from Rekiosk want to raise. And, I think it's important to not only read books, but also talk about them and learn about them. So I'm going to be trying to answer some questions and maybe knock a few of them out of the park. Let me put my question answering glasses on. Okay, if they're okay, we can start. Well, I first went online in 1986. I had an Osborne computer. This is before my first Mac. And, I've been involved in all of this as an online citizen for all these years. And I've seen the appeal of the internet grow dramatically. Internet news sites now get more hits, if you will, than newspapers are being sold. It's changed the whole nature of our media system. At the same time, it's terrified people in government, people in power who want to monitor us and monitor us more carefully. And they've come up with all kinds of new technologies to mine data, to see who we're talking to be able to surveil, if you will, our relationships with people in other countries and people in our own country. Whether or not this is legal has yet to be determined, but it's scary. And I think everybody is feeling a sense of caution because the whole idea of privacy seems to have gone out the window. And it's a concern, but not only privacy in a personal sense, in the sense that speech being protected, that people should be able to feel comfortable talking about what they want to talk about. And when people are intimidated or fearful, they tend to pull their punches, they tend to self-censor themselves. And this is what's frightening, really, in a democracy. About this whole surveillance system, I've had some personal experiences with it going back into the 1960s when I was a journalist in London, a reporter for Ramparts magazine, which was the muckraking magazine at the time. And I was investigating CIA activities in Africa based out of London. And I later found out that the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA were very interested in what I was doing and were keeping files on me, sometimes actual surveillance of events that I went to. One of these geniuses, these spies, wrote a report about how I wore my hair in a bouffant style commonly seen in women, and here I thought I was this big terror, to the system, and they wrote down appearance funky, about me. So in a way it was deflating, but it was also revealing that they would go to that trouble to monitor somebody who was hardly a serious threat to the country and was working for an independent alternative media outlet. And when I finally got my files to the Freedom of Information Act, they were heavily redacted, which means someone had taken a black pen and crossed out parts of the files. And, when I later went to the Civil Liberties Union, and they said they sued on my behalf. And then, I won at the first round, but the second round, they just threw me right out of court. And years later, the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts wrote to me and said, do you want these files that we have in our office, or should we send them back to the CIA? So, it was kind of a game then, but obviously it's become a very serious industry of surveillance. And I've written a lot about this in my books and in my newsdissector.net blog and in mediachannel.org, which is the website that I edit. I think we all need to be very concerned about this. And we have to have a lot of respect and support for whistleblowers like Ed Snowden and Bradley Manning and others who are taking real risks to inform us about what our government is doing. Well, I think the impact is major, but invisible. When you grow up in a system, and that's the only system you come to know, you really don't realize that it could be anything else. There were 50 companies in the media. That there are now 5 to 6 companies. It's media concentration. And, in a sense, what we see, what we hear, what we read is filtered through the system, which tends to be not really competitive against each other, but basically copying each other. So if you turn to Fox, you might get the same story with a certain spin that you get on MSNBC, but it'll still be the same story. We won't really learn about the rest of the world. And right now you see what happens when a new network like Al Jazeera America is about to launch, and it's being denied access to a lot of media outlets, in part because they're afraid of it. They're terrified of it. They try to make it seem as if it's terror TV, when in fact it's coming out of a country that produces oil and gas that's sold to us, a very conservative country, Qatar, that works with us, supports the war against Gaddafi, supports the war against Assad in Syria. And yet they're represented as sort of an evil, enemy, the jihadis. And nobody tells you that Fox News is one of its top investors is a Saudi prince. Okay? So we live in a globalized world. And unfortunately, Americans are very uninformed and underinformed about the rest of the world, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm basing it not only on my intellectual inquiries, my journalistic research, but on my experience having worked at ABC News, CNN, CNBC. I've been on the inside, and I know how the game is played. And I'm able to bring that experience to bear in writing about what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. Well, I don't know that we want to reverse the trend of the mainstream media becoming less credible. I think people are fed up with it in many ways and are looking for alternatives. That's why, in a sense, ironically enough, the most watched and the most accurate news program on television is on a comedy channel. How do you explain that? Why is Jon Stewart has so much respect for the news and information he brings to bear when most of our big networks do not, and increasingly have smaller and smaller ratings and less admiration among viewers who can't tell the difference between one and the other. They differentiate themselves by the color of their sets and by their personalities. That's what they market. They don't really market the information, tell you what you're learning from a particular network. At awards time and award seasons, yes, they're very proud of the one documentary they've done about something that matters. But by and large, we're in a trivialized information environment where the more you watch, as I wrote in one of my books, the less you know. Well, I think the hunger for human rights, for information, for an opportunity to participate in a democratic culture, to have a say, to be treated with respect, so that women, are treated as full citizens, so that human beings have the respect of human beings. This is a universal impulse. That's why we have a universal Declaration of Human Rights, not an American declaration. It's something that people all over the world rally to, and we've seen many different struggles. I've been very involved in and write about South Africa a lot, where Nelson Mandela and the ANC, electrified the world by challenging the apartheid system, by bringing into reality a democratic society and with a constitution that's really better than the American Constitution when it comes to protecting people's rights. Although most Americans don't know that, they don't have any information really about what actually happened there. So I think what we're seeing is more and more people around the world pushing for freedom, for liberty, for democracy, and more rulers around the world pushing back against their desires and their needs. We're talking now on the night of a massacre that took place in Cairo in Egypt today. Over 1,000 people wounded, at least 600 people killed by the Egyptian army, which is supported basically by the American military and financially and otherwise. So, we're in a world where, the lines are being drawn clearly. And the challenge is for how can we get people to show empathy, compassion, and understanding for people who don't speak our language, who have different cultures, but also want many of the same things that we want. And unfortunately, our media doesn't do a good job of sharing those values. And interesting, news is is interesting to the degree that it interests us, and a degree that it touches us in some way, our hearts as well as our heads. When it's just the kind of anchors reading, turgid copy, people tune out and turn off. And that's what the experience has been with a lot of the media. And that's why new media forms, digital media, are so important. That's why, for example, ebooks are a cool way of, disseminating information in a much more affordable way. From using technology to get that information to people. I think that's really the future here of the dissemination of information. Well, in my own life, I think I've become a journalist, not because I went to journalism school, not because I went and studied journalism, but because I began doing it in high school first, on my high school newspaper, and then at college and on a magazine, and got experience, and then found mentors, found people who are in the industry who are willing to show me things and help me learn about how to do stuff. And I think if you have an opportunity to get an internship with somebody who you respect and admire and can learn from that person, that's a great way of doing it. That's the way we used to teach people through, people who would, be working in a law firm as a clerk, and they would then learn how to be a lawyer. So we have to take initiatives. If we want to learn, we have to go beyond the classroom. We have to go into the world, into society, and get involved with nonprofit groups, with social movements, and learn by doing. And I think that will lead to making choices that you'll find much more satisfactory in life. That's been my experience. Social media can be all things. It can be a way to get trapped and seduced and spend your life on your Facebook page, putting up your menus and pictures of yourself as a young person. Or, you can actually connect to a lot of sites that are communicating information. Often Twitter is way ahead of the news media in presenting information. And there's a lot of ways now to use social media to find out about things that you don't know about. There's a tremendous variety of sites, not only in this country, but around the world, that you should try to tap into. We're right now in a studio of African news service called Sahara Reporters, presenting news about Africa that nobody in the mainstream media is getting near. And most of this information is really fascinating. It's interesting. It's being brought to you by people who really care. And I think that's the difference, where social media can really touch us in a way that most of the media, which is so commercial and is so interested in exploiting us, can never go. And that's why I think it's a great opportunity. So, both things are true, the bad and the good, and you have to be the one to make the choice.